Welcome to the ED Clinics podcast. My name is James Woledge and I'll be your host for this series where we'll be discussing everything to do with shockwave therapy and men's health conditions. That's everything from erectile dysfunction through to chronic pelvic pain syndrome, Peyronie's disease, hard flaccid syndrome, amongst others. We'll be talking to a host of experts from around the world to shed some light on these complex conditions. And we'll also be talking to patients that have been through treatment journeys themselves so you can get a greater understanding of how we can help a broad range of people with these conditions. So, without further ado, enjoy this episode.
John. There we go. Hello, John. Did we do our first chat when we do it on a Zoom? Did I chat to you first on a Zoom?
We had a telephone conversation initially.
So we have, as per the sign now, which I think you're aware of. I think you came to see us through ED Clinics, didn't you, John? Through the website initially, ED Clinics, and then you came to us as one of the sort of regional centres, so to speak.
Yes, I did. I did some searching around online. I initially spent a bit of time reading about ED clinics and specifically shockwave therapy. When you mention the word shock wave, it can feel a bit shocking. Sort of sorry for the pun, but I think I'm somebody who is naturally quite cautious. You know, when I'm entering into a relationship with any professional person. Mm. So I did a fair amount of research on shockwave therapy, and that signposted me to you guys, and that's when I picked up the phone and I spoke with Tom initially.
Right.
And then I came into the clinic and I had an initial consultation with you, I think, at the time.
Yeah, it must have been the case, yeah. This was just at the end of last year, and this was just purely for ED, wasn't it?
Yes, specifically, yeah.
Okay. And so for people, that the idea behind what we're trying to achieve with the podcast is for people to understand there's a sort of pathway of, like you just said, you know, people doing investigations and so forth, and then coming to us. So then how do you felt that went in terms of November and then forwards on from that? Just talk us through how that process worked for you.
Well, I was in a state of anxiety. I'd kind of tussled with this problem for 3 or 4 years. I tried all the kind of usual stuff, you know, medication and talking therapies and God knows what else. No, you know, so all of which had some beneficial effect, but quite frankly, you know, it still left me in a place of anxiety. And of course, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you're anxious, then you get anxious, and if you've got anxiety, it makes erectile function more difficult in the moment. Now, fortunately, I had a very sympathetic and understanding partner at the time. And I shared with her that I was facing this particular problem. We've been able to sort of develop a very open and discussive kind of relationship. So we chatted about it, and I said that, you know, I've been looking at stuff online, and it was my intention to go and reach out and get some help. And she was very supportive about that, and even offered to come with me. And I said that wasn't necessary. I'm quite happy to explore this on my own. Mm. And that's where really that's where the therapeutic process started.
And that was obviously me back in November, and then seeing Tom, wasn't it? And Tom, you obviously, did you start the treatment? When was that?
About December time, I think, or just into the new year.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had Tom. We had our first session. The thing I love about what Tom does is he has a very kind of matter-of-fact way of being able to deal with this stuff, almost as if you're going to chat about Tom about getting your electric drill fixed or something, you know. It's not it's just not an issue. And Tom, you got a great way of sort of putting people at ease, you know, because you are so matter-of-fact about it. It's as if, you know, stuff you're doing day in, day out, which I guess you are. I think that's really important because I mean, I'm quite liberal and I'm quite open-minded, and I'm very, very willing and prepared to talk about this stuff. But I'm also very conscious that there's lots of guys out there who live in their own bubble and they won't share or talk about these things. So to have somebody that you can go to where it's just like a chat you're having with somebody in the pub is the most fantastic thing.
Do you think that's an important part of the first session, is having that time to spend to sort of, you know, talk about work and get to know each other a bit and make it and sort of depersonalize the process a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you know, these I think this is a very sensitive area for a lot of guys. And I think a working relationship with professional people is such an important and valuable thing. And I think that can only happen if people take people are willing to take time to get to know you and to get to understand and to get to empathize. So that process really started as earlier on as coming to see you, James, and then you chatting about anything but ED. And that was really just good for getting me into a kind of a place where I felt comfortable to kind of share stuff with you, really.
Yeah, I mean, from that perspective, it's been, we've been doing this now 3 odd years. And the I think probably the most common feedback we get, rather like you just said, is that sense of, it's a massive hurdle to cross. And when they come here, and it was a bit of a learning curve for all of us, actually, not just in this clinic, but in the other clinics that we are ED clinics, so to speak. It's new to us, but actually what most guys want to do when they've been holding on to these issues for ages is just to have a sort of platform by which they can talk about things. And that's 90% of the first consultation is just listening, when they often have been through a journey of, lots of people we've seen have been to the urologists, haven't they? And they've been through tested this, tested that, had blood test this, blood test, but they always pretty much say, we've not had an opportunity to really just, this is how it is, this is how my relationship is with my partner, this is how it's affecting my anxiety levels and so forth. They don't have the opportunity to discuss it, do they?
Yeah, I think other appointments tend to be the consultants' appointments maybe are a bit more rushed, and yeah, people don't feel like they can open up quite as much. But like you said, it's good to have that initial time just to kind of ease into the process a little bit and get to know the people that you're dealing with.
Yes, and that's invaluable because given the nature of this particular condition, it kind of raises the question: where do people go for help? Well, I mean, the conventional routes are go and see your GP. Well, they're under time pressure. They don't get the luxury of spending quality time with people on this kind of issue. And in any case, that normally results in them recommending, Viagra or similar medication, which for some people may well solve the problem. But I don't see that as getting to the root of the problem. I think that's very much a panacea for masking the symptoms rather than getting to the root of it. So outside of seeing a GP, people often turn to the internet, and there's all kinds of bullshit on the internet about, how to overcome these problems, including penis pumps and all sorts of ridiculous things, which quite frankly, as far as I can see, don't work or make things worse, actually.
Yeah. And I think going back to what you said at the start as well, I think the other bit of feedback we get is that, talking about the medicalization of this issue, is that you're often put into one or two camps. You either got psychological, anxious driven ED, or you've got physical issue ED, and then you're separated rather artificially, where actually, as you said earlier on, didn't you, that one will always knock in to affect the other. So everyone has a combination of both. And that the time that we often put into the diary for those first consultations allows for the fact that we're understanding and trying to explain to people that they will always have a combination of both to some extent. Not that we are psychologists and we're going to be handling that, but just the fact that we understand it. Men will say to us, well, that just makes so much sense. Of course it's affected by me getting anxious and so forth, but there is an underlying physical issue that we're here to treat. And on that note, John, to just talk to people that are listening to this about how you then move forward from the treatment perspective, because you touched on at the start about your idea of what shockwave therapy was. Can you just explain to other men that are thinking about this what it is like as a treatment?
Sure. So the first session we had, Tom took out time to explain what shockwave therapy is. He talked about the potential benefits. He talked about the treatment plan, and he and I agreed that we would have initially 4 sessions. Then we added another 2 sessions to that by agreement. The first session really, so one of the things that Tom mentioned was that there might be a bit of mild discomfort in the process, but it really wasn't a big deal at all. Certainly there was a kind of a feeling of a kind of a sensation of receiving treatment, but it wasn't painful at all. I was aware that I was having treatment, but there was no kind of pain involved as such, and it was relatively quick. And I think the first session was about 20 minutes or so, Tom, something like that.
Yeah. And
also, and I think very importantly, you did a good job of managing expectations as well. So you did say that it's not going to be an immediate thing. It can take a while, for the beneficial effects actually to come in. And you mentioned, it might be a matter of weeks or it might be a couple of months or something. In my particular case, I very definitely started to see a difference after about 6 weeks, very definitely. And then I saw a significant improvement after 3 months, significant improvement. And of course, going back to your point, James, about the psychological aspect of this, of course, as the physical starts to improve, then the anxiety levels start to reduce as well. So that also has a benefit. Well, in my imagination, anyway, that has a beneficial effect,
Yeah. And yeah, Tom, I mean, in terms of the mechanics of the treatment and using of the shockwave, how do you, because people come with that idea of electronic, this, that, and the other, how do you explain it to people that are thinking about doing shockwave? How do you explain it to John?
I think that, well, part of the process of getting to know people is knowing what their context is, what they do for a job, and then you can tailor the explanation for that. And we try and cherry pick our patients that we're going to do the treatment on based on their response to that, their likely response to that. So if someone's got a very poor general health, overweight, diabetic, smokers, we'll try and get them to address those things first, so they're going to get the best effect out of the treatment.
Yeah, sort of, as you were saying, sort of a rather more rounded approach rather than just this is the machine and this is the mechanics of it and the protocol. I often do discuss things like nutrition and weight loss and that sort of stuff with it as well. And the fact that some of the medications can work alongside the treatment as well to try and stimulate blood flow and so forth. So in terms of other people listening in again, John, would there be any advice that you give to people that are thinking about doing this, or how you maybe came to a point in time where you thought, yeah, I'm going to do this because the other stuff hasn't worked, or anything else that you might want to impart upon people that are thinking about going for something like this as a treatment?
Well, I'm very aware that there's a stigma involved, in any guys who are kind of suffering, with ED. And if we look at the way in which other kind of sociological issues have been addressed over the years, so for same-sex relationships, for example, we're now getting to a point where that's kind of acceptable and people are kind of used to it and they're kind of accepting of it, even with their own family members. And I think it feels to me as though this area of shockwave therapy and in particular guys talking about ED, it feels like we've still got a bit of a cycle to go through before societally guys are prepared to openly have those conversations.
Yeah.
But I would say to anybody who currently is detecting a reduction in performance of that type, just reach out, just do it, because as we know with fear only continues to grab a hold of people until they make the first move, and then the fear starts to dissipate. So I would say that anybody that's facing that, reach out and just reach out for help, because they'll be pleasantly surprised as to, the level of support that's there.
That's kind of you to say. And like you say, the irony is that 50% of people roughly over the age of 50 will have some element of ED. You think that's huge numbers, right? But yet it still is something when people see our advertising in clinic, don't they? They're always like, oh, you treat that? Oh, wow.
Yes.
How many people do you see with that? So we've got quite a few people that we see with this because it's so common. And it's always surprised at how many people get it over the age of 50. Half of people.
I think that coyness, is transmitted in the patients as well, and that they don't maybe recognise or want to adopt any sort of strategy to address the initial signs and symptoms of it. What sort of things did you notice initially when you were that sort of led you on this pathway?
Well, the obvious thing was the physical kind of effect of it was kind of losing erections initially to a minor extent, and then it became more of a problem, and then the anxiety kicked in. And as the anxiety kicked in, that made the ability to keep and maintain an erection even more difficult, So it became a growing problem. And I think my initial go-to was to try and, well, I did actually see the GP, and the GP did actually recommend Cialis. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a longer lasting type version of Viagra.
Right. Okay. So the doctor put me on that, and then that was okay for a while, but it didn't have any repetitive effect, which is when I reached out to you guys, and that's really when the difference came along.
And are you back to a point that you were at before this started going south? Do you think has it turned back the clock somewhat?
Well, if I think about where I was, James, when I first reached out to you guys, I would say it's 80% better than it was right now.
6 sessions was that?
Yes, 6 sessions in total. Yeah.
That's really good.
I wouldn't say I'm back to where I was when I was 25.
No, yeah, well, that's realistic, right? You said that, Tom. Realistic prognosis. Yeah.
Indeed. And I think, Tom and I talked about having some follow-up sessions, and I'm fully intending on doing that, actually.
Right.
Because, I've been so encouraged by the effectiveness that, it's something that I want to carry on maintaining going forward.
Okay, good. Any other questions from you, Tom? Or anything else you want to say to us, John?
No, I think the reason we sort of asked you to get involved in this podcast is actually you're kind of the classic story, really, that's going to sort of encompass the histories that we're going to sort of see, isn't he?
And the fact that he's rather usefully very erudite on the subject.
Yeah.
And open about it helps. But yeah, I mean, I think that the combination of anxiety, the acceptance that the anxiety influences the physical, and vice versa, is such a common story. And the way you described it was absolutely spot on. And that, rather than having that on-point medical intervention, which is psychological therapies or physical therapies, what we've learned from doing what we do is that it is that blend of both, and we sort of tackle him in our own way, although we're not qualified, as I say, psychologists, but it's an acceptance that that's a part of the process. Just the listening and understanding of it, as you say, is helpful. The fact that we get on the same page about that sort of stuff.
Well, it's good work you guys are doing. I mean, I think for, it's the, as you can see, for me, it's been transformational in my life, really. And I think to the extent I've become a real advocate, really, of Tom. Shockwave. Well, Tom as well. Tom does a great job, but I think I've become a real advocate in amongst my family, friends, wider sort of community. To the extent where I can find myself in a pub having a chat to somebody, and you kind of get to know them, and then you get onto the more intimate kind of subjects in chatting, and I'm saying, how are things in the basement department, because I just want to know if guys my age are struggling, and let's face it, statistically there's going to be a good number who are.
Yeah.
Then why not say to them, look, it's okay, chat about it, it's fine, go and reach out, go and see these guys.
Good for you, John. So I think we'll wrap it up there, and hey, thanks very much for joining us. It's really kind of you to do this for us, and we might see you again when you want to come up and have a top up. Yeah,
it won't be too long. Yeah.
Thank you very much, John. Cheers.
Bye for now.
Cheers, mate.
Bye.
See you, John. Take care.